We bought pizza once a month for the entire prison. We
Nice.
bought a snow cone machine for the rec yard.
Hi, everybody. I'm Todd Denkin. Welcome back to another edition of Becoming the King of Pot. With me, as always, is my ex-criminal cousin. He's not my ex-cousin, but he's an ex-criminal, right? Bruce Perlowin, the King of Pot. Welcome to the show, Bruce.
Thank you, Todd. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm very excited about today's episode because we're going to have the continuing saga of my good friend and giant smuggler, Stephen Kalish.
Yes, Stephen Kalish, the gentleman smuggler. Welcome back to yet another edition of Becoming the King of Pot. Happy to see you again, sir.
It's a pleasure to be back, gentlemen.
Well, we are going to talk about this £1 million smuggle that we talked about in on the last episode that you were here. So I'm excited to talk about that, and then you go and you get arrested, and we'll talk about all that too. But before we do, if you are watching us for the first time or the 100th time, thank you for that. Please smash on that subscribe button. It helps us here at Becoming the King of Pot. And thank you in advance for that. So, Stephen, welcome back. You know, I've listened to the show that you have done with us several times, all of them, and it still fascinates me that you had so much going on. You were dealing in so much darn money. I mean, last time we talked, you were handling about $100 million a week, right? And making like $1.5 million a week. Set the scene up. You're getting ready for this £1 million smuggle. Tell us what's happening.
Well, the operation was called America's Heartland, which I named because we were bringing it into Missouri, which was America's Heartland.
Right.
And it was, we were offloading it on the Missouri River. I had secured a turkey farm with some old turkey farmers through one of my crew members that had actually was the same gentleman that secured the offload site for the bulldog operation. So they had no idea how much pot we were bringing in. They were rednecks through and through, and I had to be really careful with them. I didn't want them to have. Didn't want them to know we were bringing in $300 million worth of marijuana.
Right. And
But
how do you hide that? How do you hide that fact that you're bringing in all of this weed?
Well, first of all, they were going to be there during the operation, and they were being paid $1 million, $500,000 up front, and $500,000 after the operation. And the whole purpose of me flying back to the United States from Panama, which presumably was going to be one of my last trips up at the U.S., was to fly up to St. Louis, Missouri, rent a car, drive out to the turkey farm, and meet with the owners of the farm, pay them another $250,000 in cash to secure the spot, and spend a couple hours watching the traffic on the Missouri River, of which there was none, fortunately. Right. And we had poured some gravel down. So the plan was to anchor the barge right up on the banks of the Missouri River, and we'd put in some posts to tie off the barge, and I had designed another set of electric conveyor systems that I had personally designed this time that were $300,000 conveyor systems. And
Wow.
I took one of my
How does that get all set up on the side of the river?
Well, you got to envision there's a 200-foot road down to the barge, 150-foot road down to the river where the barge would be anchored.
Yeah.
And from there, we would back the tractor trailers as close as we could within 150 feet, 100 feet, 100 to 150 feet of the barge. And the conveyor systems would run into the barge, similar to what we did with Operation Bulldog. And they just ran faster and I had 2 sets, so we could run 2 sets of conveyors simultaneously. And we would load 2 trucks simultaneously, similar to the
Right.
Bulldog. Because this is 1,000,000 pounds, and it was going to take a lot of time and a lot of work. But it was a very isolated area.
Steve has mentioned a couple times now the Bulldog load. And for those of you that missed the previous episodes, one, you should go and watch them. But two, the Bulldog load was a 300,000 pound load that came in. That was absolutely the largest load in history. I mean, I've read all the books. All those are smuggling books back there, and listen to all of us guys telling our stories now. And there's nobody bigger. The thing that struck me about a 300,000 pound load was one, the conveyor belts, going up. He told me about that when I met him in Pleasanton about the Bulldog load or Texarkana. But you had 150 people doing the offload at the Bulldog load. That was like,
About 125 approximately.
yeah. So and again, I've done a lot of smuggling. I've read all the other smugglers' books, most of them. Nobody has ever had 150, 125, over 100 people doing. I mean, I thought I had a lot, 16 lookouts just in the Bay Area. That's 16. That ain't 125. How many?
Right.
So that's the Bulldog load, 125 people. How many people were actually going to be on location for the 1,000,000 pound load?
We had about 175.
Wow.
And the
That is
only
crazy.
reason for having that many people was in case the conveyor systems broke or the generators broke down or we had to do it manually. I mean, you have to be prepared for all eventualities. It's just
Sure.
the business. I mean, if something's
150
going to
foot
go
conveyor
wrong, it
belt.
will.
Y-
And
yeah,
in every
150
op I've
foot.
ever been involved in, something always happened. It's Murphy's Law. It
Yeah.
may have been small, may have been large, but something always happened. Fortunately, nobody ever got hurt other than myself, which is perfect, in a
Right.
50,000 pound op in North Carolina when I had to pull out a tractor trailer that got stuck in the mud. And when the chains broke, it threw me into the steering wheel and I ended up with 20 stitches in my chin.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, it's.
150 foot conveyor belt. That's a lot of points of failure where it could break, it could go wrong. And did it often do that? And did you end up doing things manually?
No,
Never.
our conveyor
Wow.
systems never broke down. We had some really serious mechanics working for us. That one in particular, um, his name was Dona. Um, and he's since deceased, but he was in charge of managing our generators and our conveyor systems and basically all our heavy duty equipment that we
Right.
kept on standby, our trucks, our vans, our transport vans for personnel. And because
So
you
he
got
was
to,
like your teamster. He,
yeah,
he was like your
well,
teamster. Yeah.
similar,
Yeah.
and that was another thing, um, in preparation for America's Heartland. Now, the feds had named the operation, the Master Blaster because the name of the barge, the name of the tugboat, was actually the Master Blaster that I had bought through a shell corporation called Steverick Fuel Supply, a Panamanian shell corporation I'd set up at Panama. So I had flown up to St. Louis to meet with the owners of the turkey farm, and We took a cab to a hotel. I didn't want them knowing we were flying in on a private jet. I didn't want them knowing where we were staying. Just out of precaution. And we met him at the turkey farm, which was probably a couple hours from St. Louis, on the Missouri River. And we got out there 8 o'clock at night, and we were, looking at the roads, making sure the gravel had been poured and the moorings had been placed properly for the
Try to tie
anchoring,
up the boat.
anchoring of the tug and barge. And while we were sitting in the truck, I had taken the $250,000 and given them their second down payment for using their property, and instructed them not to spend the money or put it in the bank or go out and buy any new cars. It was, things you needed to tell people that weren't accustomed to having large sums of money at any given time. So, and that kind of irked them. I mean, they kind of got in my face, what do you think we are? You think we're stupid? They were carrying guns. I mean, they had a 45 in his waist, and I was, like, look, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you how to be safe. And if you want your other $500,000 after we finish our work here, I said, just put your money away. Don't tell your wives about it until we're done. And then you can go do whatever you want to do. If you need any help with banking your money, let me know. So we spent the night there. We left maybe 2, 3 in the morning, and we're very happy. In the 4 or 5 hours we were there, we saw no boat traffic, which was perfect. Not that we were worried. I mean, we'd had people already surveilling the Missouri River from that time of night, and there just wasn't any boat traffic.
And how big is the Missouri River? How wide is it? I guess it must be a giant piece of water, right?
Yeah, it is. It's several hundred feet wide.
Yeah.
I mean, you take the Mississippi River up all the way to St. Louis, and that's where you pick up the Missouri River and head east. And once you head east, you reach the turkey farm in a couple hours.
Was it normal to have any kind of barge traffic in that area? I guess going to,
St. Louis, yeah.
Okay.
It was a fuel barge. So it wasn't unusual to be hauling fuel up the Mississippi River. Not at all.
And was it tugboated the whole way?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, that was the plan anyway.
Yeah.
Didn't quite come to fruition. So after we were satisfied with the offload side and I'd paid the additional deposit, we went back to St. Louis, and it was probably, I don't know, 1 or 2 o'clock. And we flew from St. Louis back to Tampa. And the purpose of flying back to Tampa, Florida was to remove from my house in Tampa, Florida, which had previously been our money counting house. And I knew that Tampa was hot at this point for a variety of reasons. We had been told by one of the FBOs we used. FBO is fixed based operations. They're facilities for private jets, primarily at airports. And we'd been told on one of our trips, one of our vacations over to Nassau in the Bahamas, that after we departed for the Bahamas, that the feds had showed up And at that point, we were flying on our private jet, November 39292, which was our personal Lear 35A that we customized and Noriega had used, and it was a pretty tricked out aircraft. But when we returned back to Tampa, Florida, after spending the weekend in the Bahamas on our sport fisherman, we had a 46-foot boat we kept in Nassau, and we would
Of course
fly
you
over
did.
there in Campbell
Right.
on a Friday night, and then the next morning we'd go out to the Exuma Islands and do some diving and, catch some lobster and do some, whatever we were doing
Yeah, for
with
sure.
whoever we were doing it with.
Sure.
And so when we fly back into Tampa, the manager of the FBO tells our pilots, my personal pilots, that the FBI had showed up after we had departed and wanted to know who the passenger manifest, which they did not have. Well, as soon as I heard that, I knew there was some kind of heat on from some source in Tampa, which I
Yeah.
traced back to the cocaine importation that I had inadvertently got involved with, which I believe I described earlier in one of my earlier
Yeah.
segments.
Yeah.
Steve,
But
Steve, were you a fugitive at this time?
oh yeah, I was a federal fugitive. I had jumped a federal appeal bond out of Galveston, Texas, for 100,000 pounds, and I had subsequently been indicted or knew I was to be indicted in the Eastern District of Texas on a RICO charge and several other places. So anyway, I knew we were hot, so I immediately had our Learjet hangar down in Fort Lauderdale at the FBO we used there and put inside the hangar. And I chartered another jet out of Oklahoma City that was completely unrelated to anything that we had done previously in the past. So and I put everybody on alert. So we flew back into Tampa that night, arrived 2:30 in the morning, and lo and behold, on the tarmac is November 39292, our Lear 35 that I had explicitly ordered to be hangared in Fort Lauderdale. So I have a Ford Bronco at the FBO that I had left. So when I arrived back, I could have transportation to go to my house off of St. Charlotte Drive in Tampa, Florida. And when I arrived and I saw our jet on the tarmac, I realized that now both jets would be hot. Fortunately, I wasn't arrested at when we arrived back at 2:30 in the morning. Nobody was there at 2:30 in the morning. So
Why was your jet on the tarmac? Were they searching
because
it?
my partner Lee Rich, and who I had requested to stay down in the Cayman Islands to keep the feds off me and have them watching him down in the Cayman Islands, because he had dual citizenship and he had a 65-foot sailboat down there and a beautiful home. And so we had some women down there and they'd been partying, and instead of Lee taking a commercial flight back to Tampa or chartering another jet, he called up Fort Lauderdale exec where we hangared our jet and said, "Look, just pull our jet out of the hangar and come pick me up in Grand Cayman, and then fly me to Tampa, and then we'll figure out what to do from there. And Lee didn't know where I was. To give Lee credit, he didn't know I was flying back from St. Louis that night.
Right.
Although the jet should have never been pulled from the hangar. Well, when I saw the jet, after leaving the airport, we stopped at a payphone and I called Lee. And of course, he's wide awake, 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:30, and he's snorting cocaine, and there's music in the background. And I go, Lee, turn down the music and tell me why in the fuck did you take our jet out of the hangar? I said, I just got back to Tampa, and now both jets are hot. We know that there's heat on us, and I don't know what's going to happen. Now, tomorrow morning, you come to my St. Charlotte house and make sure you're not followed and pick me up, and we'll go back to the FBO and we'll park about half a mile away, and you can go in and tell the 4 pilots, 2 of them to go back to Oklahoma and the other 2 to go put our jet back in the hangar. Lee Rich picked me up the next morning. You know, about
Wait, let me
10:30,
just let me interrupt for a second. So you're on extremely high alert at this point. You think you're going to get busted. You are avoiding feds at all costs. What's your happening in your head now? That are you really afraid that something's going to happen, or is it business as usual?
No, I am acutely aware that the feds are not only watching our Learjet, but
Yeah.
watching the people that were involved in the cocaine importation. So I've gone out of my way to not associate with any of those people. I've put everybody on lockdown. We've isolated everybody. I'm closing down my home in Tampa, which was the only reason I flew back to Tampa, which was
Right.
probably a mistake. But I had a computer and I had some files and some business records that were in my St. Charlotte house that I had to get out. So I told Lee to pick me up the next morning. We go back to the FBO. He could send the jets back. And that's what we did. Well, Lee and another friend of mine, Richard, went back in and, we parked the Bronco. Lee and Richard went into the FBO and they were in for about 15 minutes and didn't come out. And that was too long. And
Yeah.
at that point, I knew something was up. Well, I got out of the Bronco and I started walking, and I probably got, I don't know, quarter of a mile away, and I'm surrounded by the feds. And they,
Wait, hold
beat
on,
it to
Steve.
death.
You're walking. I got to get this visual. You're walking away from the car, the Bronco, and are you on the tarmac? Are you in the woods? And how did they surround you? Did cars come rushing up? Or were they hiding
No,
in the bushes?
we had parked in a parking lot about a half a mile away from the FBO,
Hmm.
right? Plenty of parking. So we had parked, but the feds were watching the parking lot. They were
Yeah, of
watching the
course.
FBO. There was a whole task force there. And I walking away from the Bronco, and I don't get very far. And the special agent in charge of the Tampa field office for the FBI walks up to me along with some other agents, and they're very polite. And they go, Stephen Kalish? And I go, no, my name's Frank Brown. They go, no, Stephen Kalish. And I said, no, here's my driver's license. Here's my passport. They go, look, we know who you are. You're under arrest for a fugitive warrant out of Galveston, Texas, from a conviction in 1980. So I go, okay, fine. So they put me in cuffs
Right.
and they
Right.
take me to
Right.
the Tampa field office. And when I walk into the Tampa field office, it's a big room, like I mean, this is before they have screens. And they all have whiteboards. And we walk in, and on the whiteboard, there's a list of names. And I look at the whiteboard, and I see Chick Fordna, who headed up the 1,000-kilo cocaine importation. And then I see Lee Rich, my partner, who's flown my Learjet up to Tampa earlier that day. And then I see the name Skip, and that's it. Not Frank Brown, not Skip Brown, just Skip. Because nobody really knew who I was in Chick Fordner's organization. So it turns out the way they had figured out who I was we had taken this trip to Nassau that I had previously spoken about when the FBI came to the FBO and wanted to know who was on that plane. Well, what the FBI did was they found out that we had cleared customs through Fort Lauderdale Executive Aviation coming back from Nassau, which was a small customs office located at a small airport in Fort Lauderdale. And what they did was they had a customs declaration cards sent up to the Tampa field office, and they scanned them for fingerprints, and they lifted my prints off of Frank Brown's declaration card and matched it up to Stephen Kalish. So they had figured out that Frank William Brown, aka Skip, was actually Stephen Kalish. So they arrested me under this fugitive warrant from Texas, which in my perspective was fine. They didn't know anything about my million-pound operation. They didn't know anything about me being involved in the 1,000-kilo operation or the 300,000 pounds that we smuggled. Nothing. I mean, we smuggled well over 1 million pounds of pot after my arrest in Galveston.
Right. Yeah, so you found that interesting. Then you were probably trying to pry them for information on what they knew, right, and what they didn't know, so you can continue operating.
Oh, absolutely. So they take me into the field office, and I see all these names, and I see, there's 25, 30 agents working in the field office, and they take me into the special agent in charge. He's got a small executive office, and there's a couple of DEA agents and customs and FBI, and, they're doing their, okay, tell us what you're up to. And I'm looking around at them, and I'm going, I don't think there's anybody, and this really pissed them off. I said, there's nobody in this room that has a security clearance for me to tell you what I'm up to.
Steve, what year is this? What year? What month and year?
This is July of 1984. I said, look, call somebody from the U.S. State Department, have them come over and let me talk to them first, and then we'll see what happens. So he goes, don't get smart with me, asshole. And I went, look, I'm being polite here. I'm being a gentleman. I said, either honor my request or hand me that telephone that's sitting on your desk. And he goes, you better think about what you're doing, son. And I said, look, Jerry Coughlin was his name. I said, I know exactly what I'm doing. So I reached over and grabbed the phone, and he put his hand on top of my hand. And I said, look, I'm entitled to a phone call. Now you're going to give me my phone call. My phone call? So he lifts his hand off my hand, and I dial my attorney's phone number in Houston, Texas, who happens to be Dick DeCaren, one of the foremost criminal defense attorneys in the country, wrote a foreword for my book. And I know the number by heart. So, 713-223. I still know it. It's still
That's
his
so funny.
number in Houston, Texas, right? So I
Well,
called.
now he's going to get a lot of phone calls. So
Yeah, well, he was just named one of the 100 most influential men in the state of Texas.
wow.
He's really a terrific criminal defense attorney. Hopefully, I'll never
Well,
have to
anybody using pot in Texas will need him because Texas just made hemp illegal again. Isn't that
Yeah.
nice?
But
He wrote the foreword to this book, you said?
yeah,
And this is the book, everybody, that you can read all about Stephen Kalish, the gentleman smuggler. So
That
Yeah.
Bruce has been dying to hold up this whole time, right? Make sure, is that on Amazon? Is that where we get it?
yes,
Amazon or Barnes and Noble or Walmart
Nice.
and I will post a link on my website to where you can buy it directly from Ingram Spark and get it at half price.
Oh, nice. Yeah, send us that link and we'll
Yeah,
we'll post it
I will.
below text.
I
Yeah.
will. And so you don't have to pay the 45% commission that Amazon
Nice.
makes. But back to the
Nice.
story. So
Yeah.
I dialed my attorney in Houston, and his secretary, who he's had for 20 years, immediately recognizes my voice. And she goes, Stephen, what do you need? I go, well, I need to talk to Dick, and I need to talk to him right now. She said, hold on. And she puts me through, and Dick's first words to me are, I knew I'd be hearing from you soon. And I go, well, unfortunately, you can find me in Hillsborough County Jail within about an hour, and I need you to come over and represent me for my case here in Florida. And remember, I've only been arrested on a 4-year count for failure to surrender for my Galveston sentence.
Right.
So I'm not really worried about what else might come from all the other activities.
about that extra million pounds you smuggled since from then to this point.
Yeah. So the feds, after I call my attorney, they can't talk to me anymore. They take me to Hillsborough County. Dick Karen flies over the next day, and I tell him what's going on, and I tell him what I've been up to and what I'm more concerned about than the 4-year sentence that I'm going to have to go serve at some facility. Texarkana is where I've been ordered to surrender. Oh, he said, okay, no problem. It's going to cost you $250,000. Anyway, ended up costing me $1 million plus. But I asked Dick, I said, you want me to pay you in Panama, or you want me to wire the funds to your account in Texas? And he goes, no, pay me in Texas. I don't want to, no illicit funds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No illicit funds. Wait, weren't all of your funds illicit?
He just wanted to make sure that he didn't get any trouble from me paying him funds into a Panamanian account.
Right.
He paid taxes on all the money he made.
Well, you're making $1 million a week laundering. This is like pocket change.
Well, yeah, pretty much. So here I am in Texarkana, and I spent a couple weeks there before they put me on the prison bus up to Atlanta Penitentiary, where I spend a week.
Oh, so you're just guilty. You didn't surrender. You were sentenced, then you didn't show up for jail, and so now they've captured you, and now you have to go.
Now I have to go to jail.
Yeah.
Did I meet you that first time, Steve?
Yeah. This is the first time we met.
Because I remember you telling me. That I'm not too worried. He goes, what I'm really worried about, there's a couple more cases I might get indicted on, and that's what I'm really worried about.
It was, a 4-year sentence is 48 months, and at that time, you served a 30-year sentence. So divide 48 by 1/3. So I figured I'd have to spend, 18, 19
15,
months.
16 months, yeah.
Yeah. And I figured I'd make camp. I'd end up at federal prison camp, hopefully before they put everything together,
right.
all the other ops. So I'm moving to the federal prison system. I'm in Atlanta Penitentiary, which is not a nice place. If you've ever been there, it's just not a nice place. And then I'm on Con Air to.
Well, when you say not a nice place, is it like decrepit walls and everything
like,
broken, or is it just dangerous, or both?
It's 100 years old. It's got 80-foot concrete walls. In 1984, it was filled with Marielitos, Cuban refugees who had been emptied out of the prisons and insane asylums. And they put me in D block, which was where all the Marielitos were. And
Steve, is that the block where they broke because I was there too at a different time, similar, but they had all the windows were broken and the freezing cold air was coming in. And I devised a way to keep warm, but that's a long story. But do
you still keep in touch with him? How you kept warm?
No. Okay. Now I got to tell the story real quick. Okay. So I'm an expert. Growing up in South Florida, I'm an expert. I do not like cold. One of my rules is, why should I be cold? Right? I didn't see snow until I was 24 years old. All right. So you turn the faucet on, the hot water on your little sink, and it fills up and it runs over that little hole so it doesn't overflow. And as it's hot water, and you never run out of hot water in the prison because they have these giant heaters, and it goes underneath the porcelain, warms up the bottom of the porcelain. All right. And the hot water itself is giving off heat. Then you take your trash can, you put it inside the sink, and then you take your blanket and you put it on top of the trash can, because if you don't put the trash can in there, your blanket will get soaking wet from the water in the sink, and you put that blanket over you. Now you have this tent with the hot water, the porcelain underneath heating up. The guy came in the morning to my cell serving food. They would come down the hallway and give you your food. He goes, "Whoa, what did you do? This is 15 degrees warmer inside this cell than anywhere else." So that's the secret of keeping warm in Atlanta Penitentiary.
Aha. Prison secrets right here on Becoming the King of Pond. Right?
I was, it was July of 1984, so I wasn't worried about staying warm. It was hot,
for sure. Especially in Atlanta.
Anything.
Yeah.
It wasn't air conditioned. So from Atlanta Penitentiary, they put me on Con Air, the Marshall's 727 transport to El Reno. And then I spent a week in El Reno in segregate. They segregated us because I was a high-risk prisoner because I had jumped an appeal bond. And from El Reno, they drove me to Texarkana. And that's where I met Bruce. They processed me at Texarkana and put me in E block. And, one of the prison guards escorted me to the cell. And we were in a corner cell, I remember, and I walk in the cell and there's Bruce sitting on the top bunk, and he's a Sikh at the time, and he's got a turban on, and he's dressed all in white. And I'm going, my name's Stephen. And he goes, "Hey, I'm Bruce." I said, "You want the top bunk?" He said, "Yeah, I prefer the top bunk." I said, that's good. So that's how I met Bruce. And we got to be pretty
That's
good friends.
crazy. You guys end up in the same cell. And what was your impression of seeing this, Sikh? He's probably sitting cross-legged on the top bunk.
Oh, he was
Probably, yeah,
chanting
yeah.
at the time.
How long before you started chanting with him?
I never did.
Yeah.
I mean, I was
He's a redneck from Texas.
no, I was never a redneck.
He's
But
a
I
hippie
was-
from Texas.
I was definitely a hippie from Texas. And I was Texarkana was just, it was my way out, my way back to Panama. I
Yeah.
expected to be there for 18 months. And unfortunately, I was only there for 14 months. But Bruce was there. I don't know. We were cellmates for what, 3 or 4 months before you were transferred to Pleasanton.
Yeah, about 4 months. And let me explain the dynamics in prison. You're in prison with all these a whole array of people. Remember the mafia guy was there? Some mafia guy. We didn't talk to him,
Well,
but he was cool.
Mexican mafia.
What's that?
You had your Mexican mafia, your Aryan Brotherhood,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
bank robbers, and variety.
So when you found another smuggler, it was like, oh my God, here we are, the same tribe, right?
Yeah.
So we could really relate, to each
I
other.
find it quite ironic that you guys end up in the same cell. And
How
did
did
they do
that
that
happen?
purposely? Yeah.
I think
Open
the
bunk.
guards pair you up. Italian guys go with Italian guys, black guys go with the black guys. The Aryan Brotherhood goes with Aryan Brotherhood. Smugglers go with
And-
smugglers.
And there was an open bunk in Bruce's cell.
Right.
So
Yeah,
just
that's quite ironic. That's how you guys met. So Bruce, so what's it like? What's Steven like as a roommate?
Well, he was great. He was just like me. We worked out a lot. He ran, we worked out. We were both organizing different things in Texarkana. I don't know if you were there when I got thrown in the hole for putting the poison sign in front of sugar, but he knew that sugar, like everybody else, it was poison. Right? It was very. He was. Did we go to school? Yeah, we went to college there too.
Oh.
There was college
Texarkana-
classes.
Yeah, and Steven, what was Bruce like as a mere mortal?
he was great.
In prison.
I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better cellie. He was clean. We were both pot smugglers. I was a little apprehensive about talking about all of my smuggling ventures because there was so much, I had so much history I had just met Bruce and I was trying to be careful, but I got a job in the business office. Most of the pot smugglers that I knew worked in the business office, and we did all the ordering and the inventory for making all the furniture for all the federal offices around the United States.
Oh wow,
And
that's interesting.
we got paid $1.10 an hour, which was the highest you could make in the Bureau of Prisons.
Yeah.
So, and we had to dress up in pressed khakis, and it was a cushy job, and we got away with a lot. But
So Bruce leaves 4 months into your stint. You get a new cellie, and then Bruce, you're over in Pleasanton, right? You're walking into a co-ed prison, and what's happening in your head?
Well, I found out that there was a co-ed prison. I go, what? And I had this lawyer, Alan Ellis, was it?
Yes.
Steve Alan Ellis, and he worked for a company, NCIC, National Alternatives to for Alternative to Incarceration. So he would do briefs for where to place a prisoner, and usually not in prison, in a halfway house, a work release. That was his whole spiel, or in a minimum security. but he could move you around the system. So I said, get me to Pleasanton. There's women there, right? So he did it. He was very successful, and it was it was the right security clearance for me, medium security. It was near my home. Becky and my ex-wife and my son lived in Berkeley, so that was 45 miles from Berkeley. So, and they tried and place you, at least back then they did, near your home. That's sort of a rule.
Right.
And there was none of the people that testified against me happened to be in Pleasanton, because they won't put you in a prison where somebody testified against you. You know,
I see.
so I lucked out. It was just
Yeah.
pure luck that I got there. Now I'm in heaven. Okay.
Yeah. And how do you get word back to your old roommate that there's women here?
Tony,
Oh,
Tony Triple T. We had her on a previous episode.
yeah.
And she was my brother's wife, and I would call her up and I would I would either dictate the letter, or I would send a letter to her and say, take it out of the envelope and put this letter in for Steve, and she would remail it. I think that's how that happened, because inmates aren't allowed to write to other inmates. So I sent it to Tony. Tony sends it to Steve. I said, call Alan Ellis, and get over here. There's women here.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Stephen, what were you thinking? You heard there was women in prison, in the same place, and you're thinking, shit, I got to get over there.
Well, at that time when I got the letter from Bruce, I was in a Gilchrist County jail in North Florida, and I was having conjugal visits every week with my wife, and I was pretty much running the jail up there. I was, by
And when you say running it, you got privileges because you paid people,
no,
or you were just respected because you were a big criminal.
no, because I had helped the sheriff out on a state inspection that they were about to have, and then we're going to fail the state inspection, Florida state inspection. So I got the other 10 or 12 federal inmates staying there to help clean up the jail, paint it. I worked with a dispatcher on getting their books in order, and the state inspection came. They passed, so the sheriff made me a trustee, and as a trustee, I could drive the patrol car to the grocery store, or Blockbuster to rent videos, or have my wife drive up in an RV and
Nice.
spend the night with her over the weekend. I earned the privileges. Well, I never, ever paid off a law enforcement officer in any facility that I was incarcerated in, ever. I wouldn't do it. I did not want to put myself in a position of jeopardizing my plea bargain agreement, for one. And secondly, I was done with breaking the law. Now, on a side note, I'll mention this just on the little Gilchrist Texarkana thing. So I get the letter from Bruce, and I'm in Gilchrist County Jail. Well, I get a message last week from one of the deputies that was there 50 plus years ago, and we've stayed in touch over the years. And he has ordered 2 hardback covers of The Last Gentleman Smuggler, and he wants them
Nice.
sent directly to me so I can autograph them and send one back to him. His name is 4TJ, really a great guy, and one to the sheriff, so the sheriff can actually put it in Gilchrist County Jail. Because after I left Gilchrist County Jail, it became a famous facility for the feds or the FBI or DEA, placing prisoners who wanted an easy time.
Yeah.
Because I had earned the trust of the sheriffs and showed them that we could be trusted to not escape or run off,
Right.
and they could trust us with conjugal visits. But that's getting way ahead of myself. I'm still back in Texarkana. Bruce is back. Bruce has gone off to Pleasanton. So we're trying to make Texarkana a better place for all the inmates. So there's a photo program. It's in the visitation room on Saturdays and Sundays. There was an opportunity to have your picture taken with your family or your friends that came to visit. And the JCs, which was an organization inside the prison, ran the photo club. And it was being run by the Mexican mafia when I first arrived at Texarkana. Well, I got a bunch of myself and a bunch of our other marijuana smugglers, and we took over the JC's program. And we voted all the Mexicans out and voted ourselves in and took over the photo program and earned, and I'll make it short, earned $20,000 the first year we were in prison. They were running that program. So
at $1.10 an hour?
$20,000.
No, people would buy the photographs when they came and visited.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
And that would go into the JC's bank account. Well, we had to spend that money. So we bought cable television for the entire prison for a year. We bought pizza once a month for the entire prison.
Nice.
We bought a snow cone machine for the rec yard. We talked the warden into allowing 2 high school girl softball teams to come play a softball game on our rec yard, on our softball field. And we started a program called Helping Hands, where newly arriving inmates in Texarkana would be given a package in a little brown lunch bag that contained toothbrush, toothpaste, package of cigarettes, soap, and a couple other items, which would allow them to not be jeopardized by or taken advantage of by other prison inmates. Now, I got threatened for doing this, for taking over the JCs, because the Mexican mafia that was running the program was using the photo op program to run drugs into the prison. So the photographer from the JCs that was out taking these Polaroid pictures was also smuggling heroin back into the prison. So when we took over the program, I had my life threatened, and which didn't really bother me because I was a high profile prisoner and I still had millions of dollars. So I took him aside and I said, look, you know who the fuck I am? And I said, I suggest that you look up who I am, because if you ever threaten me again, it will be the last time you threaten me, because I will take action to make sure my life is protected. And that means I'll pay off the Aryan Brotherhood if I have to. And I was never threatened again in Texarkana.
I want to interject. I want to interject something about what he just said. Okay. We were the peaceful, we were the hippie smugglers, the gentleman smugglers. We never carried guns. His organization, my organization, a lot of the other organizations out there that we'll have on this, most of the marijuana smugglers was the cocaine people that were wacko with guns. And we were very polite. We were usually well educated, if not through college, through just street smarts. However, that said, we had the muscle. When you have that much money, you hire anyone. So we never had to use it. It's like a guy who walks around who's a black belt in karate. He knows he can take on anybody that he comes across, but he never has to use it. So it's the same thing with us. I mean, we would use it if that guy persisted. Yeah, we absolutely will. We all have the killer instinct in us,
Yeah.
but we just never ever resorted to violence.
Our self-protection instinct. And we were doing so much for all the inmates in the entire prison. I mean, we had 1,200 inmates in Texarkana, and they're
No,
getting
you're a big hero. You got
They're
a snow
getting
cone machine.
cable
You
TV,
got pizzas.
pizza one night, once a month,
Yeah.
girls playing on our softball field.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
it
it's
was
beautiful.
it wasn't bad. I mean, that was my prison experience. But while I was in Texarkana,
Wait, before you say that, we are running really long on time. So, Steven,
we're
you
at
got to
an
come
hour.
back another time, and you got to finish these stories. So you'll come back again. How about
Absolutely.
come back next week, and then we'll finish all of this stuff. So our really simple cliffhanger is come back to see the rest of the story with Stephen Kalish, the gentleman smuggler, of course, Bruce Perlowin, the king of pot.
And did he or did he not get to Texarkana with the women? I mean, to Pleasanton with the women.
Well, yeah, we know he got there because we've talked about it. But so it's not really a good cliffhanger there. Bruce.
Okay,
so
well, then what happened?
We're going to hear
all
about
these
how
women?
that happened, right? How that happened, and then how these two wacky smugglers, lived on an infamy in Pleasanton.
But one last quick question.
You don't have nothing quick. Go ahead.
Real quick, Steve. How did you deal with the trucks for that 1 million pounds? Did you have the trucks all organized? Yeah, that's 25 semis. No. What did you do? Did you have it?
That's not a real quick question. That's not a quick question.
So
we're gonna start next week. We're gonna start next week with how you organize the 25 trucks. He's Bruce Perlowin. That other handsome gentleman is Stephen Kalish, the gentleman smuggler. I'm Todd Denkin. This is Becoming the King of Pot, and we will see you next week.